framework. He may have the wind at his back as he makes a major push with Congress to get it done. The president is calling the plan the biggest tax cuts ever in U.S. history. The cuts are based around some major changes to tax brackets, going to 3 brackets from the current 7 for individual tax returns. The biggest drop in taxes will be for the top earners. The president wants to also drop corporate tax rates down to 20% from the current 35%. Congressman Mark Meadows joining us from Capitol Hill right now. He's a Republican from North Carolina. He's also the chairman of the very important House Freedom Caucus. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us. A lot of analysts are pointing out that the biggest winners in all these tax cuts, yes, there will be some benefits for the middle class, but the biggest winners by far will be the very wealthy. Is there a danger that going into midterm elections next year, these cuts will simply be labeled as tax cuts for the rich?
Well, there's always a danger, Wolf, anytime that you talk about tax cuts, that you put a label on that it just benefits the rich or this particular segment of the population. But I can tell you that the president and members of Congress are laser focused on making sure that there's those middle income wage earners that actually benefit. You talk about all the analysis that's being done. You know, I find it very fascinating that they're doing all this unbelievable analysis, Wolf, when you and I, if we were pressed real hard to talk exactly where those tax brackets are, we couldn't do it because the details haven't even been laid out. And so we're hopeful that we will see that at the beginning of next week. We'll be able to have a real debate. But I can tell you, just in the recent days, the president has weighed in on one particular thing when they were talking about a pay-for that might affect 401k plans. He says, no, this is something that helps the middle income wage earners the most. We need to make sure that we keep that intact. And so all hands on deck for those that, the moms and dads on Main Street, your viewers, the people that get us elected, we need to make sure we deliver for them.
Well, how concerned are you, Congressman, that all these tax cuts will simply raise the deficit and the national debt will go up? Some are saying $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $3 trillion.
Well, it is a concern, and really when you look at that, and you know the budget that we passed out of the House actually had some mandatory spending cuts along with being able to do aggressive tax reform. But anytime you look at increasing the deficit, you're looking at somebody paying the bill other than you and me. You know, we're looking at our kids, our grandkids to have to pay that. So we need to make sure that we're fiscally responsible. But in this particular approach, we're looking at a Senate budget that will allow us to be a lot more aggressive on reducing those tax cuts. The president has been talking about more tax cuts than tax reform, but we've got to be really aggressive in doing that to get the economy going, or we don't even have a hope of not only funding our military, but it's funding the other things, education and child tax credits, many of the things that receive great bipartisan support. So am I concerned? Yes. Are we looking really more at being aggressive on reducing the tax rates? We are perhaps at some short-term exposure on the deficit side of things.
You know, the biggest expenditures of the federal government are the so-called entitlements, Social Security, right, Medicare, Medicaid. The White House Budget Director, Mick Mulvaney, was on the Sunday talk shows saying that he personally is pushing the president for cuts in these entitlements, but the president says no, they are off limits. Listen to this.
A meeting with the president just the other day. We walked over some of the numbers, and I actually said, look, here's where it is, here's where it isn't. And Mr. President, I'm going to come back to you again and want to talk to you about entitlement spending. He said, look, I'm still not going to do it, but I'm happy to have the conversation. Same discussion we had in the spring. I promised people I wouldn't change Social Security. I'm not going to do it. I said, that's fine, but my job is to show you what that means. I think that's the right way to do it.
All right, so where do you stand? Will you support all of these tax cuts if the president gets his way and there are absolutely no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid?
You know, the president is going to get his way, and so at this particular point, it's a binary choice for us. It's either working within the framework that we have and trying to be aggressive on the tax cuts. I've raised this issue of looking at modifying, whether it be Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid, any of those items, and the president has been very emphatic. You know, personally, on 3 different occasions, he says, Mark, we're just not going to do that. It was a promise he made to the American people, and so we're looking at other areas. There is one that we do believe implement a work requirement that actually was originally passed under Bill Clinton, but that was done away with. And so you'll see some of those entitlement issues addressed on welfare reform, but on those three core issues that Director Mulvaney just mentioned, he's right. The president has been very emphatic, and we can keep coming back, but it is not going to be in this tax bill.
Just one final question, Congressman, before I let you go. If it's shown, the Congressional Budget Office and other experts, that all of these tax cuts will wind up increasing the national debt, increasing the deficit, will you vote for it?
Well, we already believe that it's going to show that it's going to increase the deficit in the short term. And so for me, I've been looking at trying to make them as aggressive as possible, even if they have to expire in 10 to 15 years. So the answer to that is, based on the parameters that have been laid out, a 20% corporate, 25% for small businesses, doubling the standard deduction for moms and dads, I will be voting on that and voting for that.